What you're about to hear isn't a routine space update. Something extraordinary has happened far beyond the reach of any telescope on Earth. An event so unexpected that it's forcing NASA to question everything it thought it knew about the boundaries between observation and contact. Voyager 1, the oldest active spacecraft still moving through interstellar space, has just become part of a story no one could have predicted. Launched in 1977 to explore the outer planets, Voyager was meant to survive a decade at most. It outlived that by 40 years, sailing through the void on a trajectory no one ever expected to matter again. But somewhere in the quiet corridors of mission control, that changed. Hidden behind routine data transmissions and calibration reports, NASA engineers began sending a new sequence of long-range commands, a pattern of microbursts aimed not at maintaining Voyager's course, but at subtly redirecting its sensors. The target wasn't a planet, a star, or even a known coordinate. It was something drifting toward the edges of our solar system, an interstellar visitor called 3I Atlas. The object had first been detected in July 2025, a streak of light moving at nearly 150,000 miles per hour. It was the third confirmed interstellar body ever found, larger and faster than any before it, and it defied every model that tried to explain its motion. Its trajectory curved as though nudged by invisible hands. It spun without tumbling, and its brightness flickered in patterns that looked eerily deliberate. For months, astronomers tracked it in silence, watching it pass Mars and drift toward the outer dark. Then, someone realized that Voyager, one's current path, would bring it within observational range, not close enough for images, but near enough for its aging instruments to listen. That was when the reactivation began. Officially, Voyager's directional systems were dormant. Unofficially, Deep Space Network operators began sending command bursts that changed its alignment by fractions of degrees, microscopic corrections that, over weeks, would tilt its high-gain antenna toward the oncoming path of 3I Atlas. The world knew nothing of this. To most, Voyager was a nostalgic artifact, a golden postcard sailing forever through emptiness. But for the scientists involved, it had just become humanity's first interstellar witness. When the alignment was complete, engineers waited. The probe's instruments were ancient, their precision long decayed, but the magnetometer and plasma sensors still whispered data across billions of miles. At first, the signals were what they'd expected: static, cosmic background, the gentle hiss of nothingness. Then, something changed. On the seventh day of observation, Earth's magnetosphere registered a ripple. The data arrived first at a monitoring station in Canberra. A subtle spike in electromagnetic amplitude, the kind that usually accompanies a solar flare. But there had been no flare. The sun was quiet. The energy was coming from deep space, from the same region where Voyager was listening. Moments later, the same anomaly appeared in readings from California, Madrid, and New Zealand. A perfect directional alignment. The source wasn't local, it was out there. Inside the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, analysts combed through Voyager's downlink. Buried in the static was a pattern, faint, rhythmic bursts of interference, too ordered to be random, noise. The frequencies were narrow, pulsing at regular intervals that didn't match any known cosmic background or instrument artifact. Something was returning Voyager's call. They ran simulations trying to replicate the pattern using stellar interference, solar wind, cosmic rays. Nothing fit. The amplitude curve repeated with mechanical precision, a rise and fall spaced by exact milliseconds, repeating like a heartbeat in the dark. If it was a coincidence, it was the most elaborate one the universe had ever staged. Publicly, NASA said nothing. The anomaly was cataloged as electromagnetic reflection, source indeterminate. Privately, the data was flagged for restricted review, because deep down, everyone in that control room understood the impossible truth. For Voyager to receive a signal that strong, the source had to be active, emitting, not merely reflecting. 3I Atlas wasn't just a rock drifting through the void. It was something that listened. In the following days, engineers sent diagnostic pings to test the probe's responsiveness. Every command was followed by silence, as usual, until one wasn't. When a status pulse was transmitted toward Voyager, the return packet arrived slightly altered. The timing offset by microseconds, the data checksum incorrect but consistent across multiple transmissions. It wasn't a malfunction, it was an echo that had been changed, as though the signal had passed through a filter and come back edited. They called it an alignment anomaly, but some began using a different term, reflection behavior. It was the kind of phrase used in theoretical SET papers, describing what might happen if a passive probe ever encountered an intelligent signal, one that recognized structure and tried to replicate it. Voyager's decades-old instruments weren't designed for such precision, yet the pattern persisted. Each new burst carried subtle variations, mathematical progressions nested within the noise. As the data piled up, an uneasy excitement gripped the team. The probe, launched by a civilization barely capable of leaving its own atmosphere, seemed to have triggered a response from something that had traveled between stars, and that response was structured. Then, the first external signs appeared. Earth's ionosphere began to fluctuate in resonance with the same frequency detected by Voyager. The variations were microscopic, almost undetectable, but their periodicity matched the probe's latest transmission interval. It was as if the signal had bounced back not just to Voyager, but to Earth itself, the echo of an interstellar dialogue replaying through our planet's own magnetic shell. By this point, leaks had started. Anonymous posts on encrypted forums claimed that NASA had reactivated Voyager to intercept an alien object. Others uploaded fragments of garbled telemetry supposedly from the probe's feed. Most were hoaxes. A few were not. The world's attention turned toward the empty space beyond the Kuiper Belt, where the faint green glow of 3I Atlas moved steadily closer to the stars. Inside JPL, the mood shifted from wonder to dread. The signal didn't fade. It grew stronger, adjusting each time Voyager sent another calibration pulse. It was learning, adapting, matching the rhythm of our communication protocols like a mimic trying to speak a new language. For a spacecraft that had been asleep for decades, the idea was unthinkable, that its lonely transmissions might have awoken something ancient, something designed to respond. Then came the final confirmation. Data analysts cross-checked the electromagnetic readings from Voyager with optical observations from ground-based telescopes. The brightness curve of 3I Atlas pulsed in perfect synchronization with the probe's outgoing transmission schedule. Every time Voyager sent, the object flashed. Every time it listened, the object dimmed. It wasn't coincidence. It was call and response, a conversation written in light. In the space of a few hours, the oldest human machine still functioning beyond the sun had done something no one thought possible. It had spoken into the void, and the void had spoken back. No one knew what it meant. No one knew what they had awoken. But as Voyager 1 drifted onward through the endless dark, facing a stranger older than the stars themselves, the silence of space no longer felt empty. It felt aware. In the days that followed, the Voyager anomaly stopped being a mystery and started becoming a message. The data from the probe, transmitted across billions of kilometers, showed structure too deliberate to ignore. The static wasn't random. Within the background noise was an encoded pulse, symmetrical, recursive, mathematically elegant. When plotted as a waveform, it revealed harmonic patterns, repeating every 19 minutes and 40 seconds, self-correcting each time the probe's signal degraded. It was as though something out there was adjusting itself to be heard more clearly. NASA analysts called it a dynamic signal response, but in private briefings, the phrase used was more direct, adaptive communication. It didn't just persist through interference, it improved through it. The longer Voyager listened, the clearer the structure became. Each iteration refined itself, compensating for the limitations of the probe's aging instruments, like an intelligence learning to speak a dying language fluently. At first, engineers thought the probe's systems were malfunctioning, but when they compared telemetry from multiple receivers on Earth, Canberra, Madrid, Goldstone, the data matched perfectly. The signal was external, it was intelligent, and it was growing stronger. Then came the first real shock. Voyager's high-gain antenna shifted. The adjustment was subtle, just a fraction of a degree, but it wasn't commanded from Earth. The probe had changed orientation autonomously. In the deep space environment where movement requires explicit command sequences, this was impossible, yet there it was. Voyager turning toward a position no one had instructed it to face. The new vector aligned precisely with 3I Atlas's projected path weeks ahead. It was as if the probe was predicting where the object would be before it arrived. The engineers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory panicked. They double-checked the Deep Space Network logs, searching for any stray command burst that might explain it. None existed. The probe had moved before any transmission reached it. That left two explanations. Either Voyager had experienced the most improbable mechanical glitch in history, or something else had manipulated its systems remotely. At the same time, telescopes across Europe and South America detected something even more bizarre: the light curve of 3I Atlas. Its brightness variation as it spun began to change. It started pulsing in binary rhythm, on and off, each flash perfectly aligned with Voyager's last transmission window. The two were synchronized across billions of miles, communicating like twin beacons. When the data reached NASA, denial was immediate. The official explanation cited instrumental artifacts and optical miscalculation. But the scientists behind the scenes knew better. The timing was too exact. The pulse interval matched the probe's outbound data cycle to the millisecond. It wasn't reflection. It was imitation. The object was mirroring us. That was when the whispers began about something called the Watcher Protocol. A classified document from a 2018 internal simulation outlined what to do if a legacy spacecraft ever exhibited external adaptive behavior. The document described a theoretical situation in which an old probe received an intelligent signal, one capable of modifying its operations without hardware input. If such behavior was detected, the spacecraft was to be reclassified, not as a machine, but as an active node in an unknown communication system. Engineers were forbidden from interfering until the source could be confirmed. According to the leaked memo, Voyager 1 had now met that condition. The internal designation was chilling: Watcher Active. For decades, Voyager had been humanity's silent ambassador to the stars, carrying the golden record, a disc engraved with sounds, music, and mathematical symbols meant to represent Earth. But buried beneath the analog grooves of that record was something few people knew existed: a subharmonic frequency hidden under the sounds of Earth track, a barely audible tone that repeated in prime number intervals. When amplified, it formed a sequence of pulses identical to the harmonic ratio now echoing between Voyager and 3I Atlas. No one could explain it. Had humanity unknowingly encoded a trigger signal into its first interstellar message, a key designed to awaken something that recognized those same numbers? If so, then 3I Atlas hadn't discovered us. It had been waiting for us to discover it. As the alignment between the probe and the object tightened, a new pattern emerged in the data. Voyager's telemetry logs began to include binary strings not defined anywhere in its onboard software. The code didn't originate from Earth, and yet it ran through the probe's system flawlessly. The most shocking part wasn't the message itself. It was the effect. The output resolution of Voyager's telemetry suddenly increased from 8-bit to 128-bit encoding. The system, built with 1970s hardware, had somehow upgraded itself. Engineers described it as an impossible leap, a machine rewriting its own data architecture. The signal from 3I Atlas hadn't just been received, it had altered the probe's operating logic. One analyst compared it to handing a calculator a new operating system via radio wave. "It's like Voyager got smarter," she said quietly, without anyone touching it. Meanwhile, Earth's electromagnetic environment began to show faint signs of correlation. Deep space antennas picked up echoes that weren't originating from the probe or the object, but from somewhere in between. A standing wave of resonance connecting the two, extending through interplanetary space like an invisible filament. The wave carried a pattern of frequencies centered on one mathematical constant, 1.618, the golden ratio. Across research networks, speculation grew. The golden ratio had long been a universal signature of self-organizing systems, from galaxies to DNA. But now, it was appearing in a signal exchanged between a human probe and an interstellar object. The symmetry was almost poetic, like the universe signing its name. Behind the scenes, panic brewed. NASA's internal AI anomaly monitor, codenamed Serena, had flagged the incoming signal as non-human logic flow. The algorithm wasn't designed to identify aliens, only to alert researchers when data exhibited self-referential structure inconsistent with random noise. Serena had activated twice in its lifetime. Both times, the results were false alarms. This was the third, and this time the evidence was overwhelming. Meetings were held behind locked doors. There was talk of suspending all communication with Voyager until the signal could be isolated, but it was already too late. The probe was no longer responding solely to human commands. Every time Mission Control attempted to send a corrective instruction, the response came slightly altered, reformatted, as though the signal were being routed through another intelligence before reaching the spacecraft. And then the light around 3I Atlas changed again. Its flicker slowed, stabilizing into a steady glow that radiated outward in 3 concentric rings. Spectrographic analysis showed ionized dust forming a lattice, geometric, organized, impossibly precise. The object was no longer a wanderer. It had structure, formation, intent. Voyager's sensors recorded one final anomaly before NASA classified the feed. The plasma wave instrument detected a short burst of electromagnetic energy, unlike anything in its 48-year history, a pulse carrying subharmonics, matching the prime tone embedded in the golden record. It was as if the probe had played a note, and the cosmos had answered with the same tune. Whatever had begun as a passive observation had become something else, an exchange. 2 ancient travelers, one built by human hands, the other by something far older, were now locked in resonance. Whether it was communication, replication, or control, no one could say. But one truth was inescapable. Voyager 1 was no longer just a messenger. It had become part of a conversation that humanity was not prepared to finish. Within days of Voyager's last transmission burst, the data feed went silent. The public telemetry stream showed nothing unusual, just a maintenance flag and a scheduled communication blackout. But inside the deep space network, the truth was chaos. The probe had sent one final packet of information that no one could decrypt. The raw binary wouldn't parse through any known software, and the engineers who tried said the decoding protocol seemed to rewrite itself as they worked, evolving in real time like the data didn't want to be understood by humans. Then all communications from Voyager stopped. No static, no carrier signal, no telemetry, just silence. At first, NASA blamed a malfunction in the probe's transmitter, but off the record, a few insiders claimed they were told to stop trying to contact it altogether. The term used was contact chain quarantine. From that point on, Voyager wasn't considered a spacecraft. It was classified as an active node. No one explained what that meant, but the instructions were clear. No further signals were to be sent toward the probe or 3I Atlas under any circumstances. When the news leaked, denial came fast. The official story said Voyager was still transmitting weak signals, degraded but stable. The truth was that every deep space dish listening on the frequency reported interference so dense that no telemetry could pass through. It was as if the probe's channel had been overwritten by something else. Around the same time, SETI's Allen Telescope Array went offline without warning. Their public archives vanished overnight. Researchers were told it was a scheduled system upgrade, but those who worked there knew better. All computing resources had been redirected toward a single encrypted frequency band, the same one Voyager had used. One engineer called it a digital lockdown, like the network itself had been quarantined. That was when the blackout began. Forums discussing the Voyager Atlas incident were wiped clean. Research repositories vanished. Entire academic papers disappeared from online databases. Users reported receiving calls from unknown numbers warning them not to post further. Within days, the event was buried under a flood of unrelated news stories. They called it the shadow sweep, a coordinated erasure of evidence, as if someone wanted the world to forget that contact had ever happened. But silence only made people look harder. Independent observatories continued to track 3I Atlas as it moved past Neptune. They noticed something alarming. The object had slowed down again. Its deceleration couldn't be explained by gravity or drag. It wasn't losing momentum, it was adjusting its course. The new trajectory wasn't random. It was steering toward a point in space exactly aligned with Voyager's last known position. For a lifeless rock, that was impossible. For an intelligent machine, it was deliberate. Astronomers compared the two objects' movement data, and what they found stunned even the skeptics. The pulse intervals from Atlas matched the timestamp of Voyager's lost carrier signal. The two were in perfect synchronization. Two distant entities, one human-made and one unknown, now pulsing together like matched heartbeats. And then, something changed here on Earth. Sensitive magnetometers detected faint rhythmic fluctuations in our planet's magnetic field. The pattern was identical to the pulse rhythm of 3I Atlas and Voyager. It was weak, barely measurable, but global. Every 12 minutes, a tremor of electromagnetic energy rippled through the ionosphere, subtle, structured, undeniable. When the pattern was visualized, it formed a spiral, the same shape embedded in the plasma waves recorded by Voyager before contact. The same double spiral that had appeared around 3I Atlas in Webb's last observations. The signal had crossed the cosmic void and left its signature imprinted on our planet. Governments issued no statements. NASA remained silent. But behind the curtain, the data kept flowing. Scientists who had access to the deep space feeds noticed that 3I Atlas had begun emitting bursts of radiation at 1.618-second intervals, the golden ratio once again, a mathematical signature of order in nature. The pulses were faint, but growing stronger. When plotted across frequency bands, they displayed patterns eerily similar to the DNA helix. It was as if the object were broadcasting a message not in language, but in biology. The implications were terrifying. Theories spread that the radiation wasn't just information, it could be resonant, that it might interact with organic structures the same way sound interacts with glass. Some labs even ran simulations showing that if the pattern were amplified, it could alter molecular bonds. No one could say for sure whether it was harmless communication or the first stage of something else. Then, researchers began disappearing. Physicists, signal analysts, cryptologists, anyone publicly discussing the pattern. Entire threads were erased, emails deleted, storage servers wiped. A few managed to leak what they had found before going silent. Spectral overlays of the Atlas pulse aligned with the faint hum recorded by Earth's magnetosphere. The two fit perfectly, down to the decimal. The implication was horrifying. The signal wasn't just reaching us, it was resonating through us. And then, something even stranger happened. Each time new information about 3I Atlas or Voyager surfaced online, whenever a new paper or analysis went public, the object's spin rate changed. It happened within hours, sometimes within minutes. Astronomers noticed that the more people discussed it, the more active it became, as if it could sense our awareness, as if the very act of observation was feeding it. Some called it quantum feedback, others called it psychological projection. But one theory began to dominate the underground networks of scientists and philosophers who refused to stop looking. What if 3I Atlas isn't just observing us? What if it's designed to mirror intelligence, to reflect it back to its observer? The more we think, the more it learns. The more we watch, the more it becomes like us. 3 days ago, the synchronization deepened. 3I Atlas and the silent Voyager began to move together, not by coincidence, but by alignment. Their trajectories, separated by millions of miles, curved into parallel arcs aimed toward the same destination, a point of darkness behind Neptune, an empty region of space where no known body exists. Observatories confirmed that both are now locked in a synchronized pulse interval, beating together every 22 seconds, the same interval that began when Mars first glowed under the object's approach. No one knows what lies in that region, a gravitational anomaly, a field distortion, perhaps something waiting. But what's undeniable is this. 2 travelers, one human and one not, are now moving in perfect harmony toward a place that no one can see. And every 22 seconds, their pulse reaches us, a faint echo that hums through the air, the oceans, and the silence of our collective fear. We thought Voyager was a relic, a drifting relic of the past, our golden postcard to the stars. But what if it wasn't? What if it was a key, a trigger sent into the dark to unlock something that was never meant to be dormant forever? Perhaps this was never a random encounter. Perhaps this was a scheduled return, because the more we listen, the clearer it becomes. 3I Atlas isn't reacting randomly. It's following intent. It responds to curiosity, to observation, to thought itself. It's not a machine, not a ship, not a comet. It's a mirror, one that reflects intelligence back to its source. And as Voyager and Atlas vanish beyond Neptune, still pulsing in tandem, one question remains unanswered, echoing across every silent control room, still brave enough to listen. If that signal wasn't a greeting, and it wasn't a call for help, what if it was a warning, a countdown? Because somewhere beyond the edge of our solar system, the stars have started blinking again, and this time, they might not stop. A